up and try again.
Hello everybody. Today we'll talk about how to process files in Python. In the past we have discussed how to basically handle files in scripting in general in Linux. But today we're going to start a series of videos that basically will show us how to handle, how to read files, how to write files, appending, and eventually we'll talk about how the file attributes, how to manipulate them as well in Python. So first of all, what we need to recognize, we're gonna start talking about how to read a file. I have a file here called sample.txt. As you can see, it's a file containing a couple of lines of text. This is a file containing lines of text and some numbers, and then another number, and then goodbye. So it's just a simple file that contains text, and we're going to be able to read it in Python using a couple of those functions that we have. So the first thing we have to do is to create a handler for the file reader. Remember that Python doesn't really have some kind of data types, although we'll talk about certain data types and how to manipulate. But in a variable, you can put out just a variable, for example, f for file. It will be assigned the process of reading or opening, a file. So open is a function that requires two arguments. The first argument is what's considered to be the name of the file we want to process. In this case, we have talked about sample.txt. So we'll talk about here sample.txt. The second argument that we have is considered to be the mode. Python has a couple of modes, and one of the modes that we have is R for reading. But in case we want to write, we can put W for writing. Or if we would like to append, which means that we would like to write something towards the end of the file, we use A for appending. So since right now we're interested only to read the file, we're just going to have the R there. Now Python recognizes that handles the file sample.txt. Of course, the name of the file sample.txt usually is in the same directory where the read file example is. I don't know if you can see to my right hand side, we have read file example.python and we have sample.txt as well. So both of them, they're in the same directory, in this case in my desktop. One natural question is, can we change the directory? And of course we can. I'll show you later on how can we establish a path for that. So for now, let's just keep it something similar. We can just have sample.txt, which is the name of the file we want to read. F contains it. And there's a couple of things we can do at this point. Once you open and once you have a handler for the file, you can simply print F like that. Unfortunately, this will not get what you were expecting. If I run this in my console, my terminal, it's going to give you this weird representation what the file explains. Basically, Python will tell you, you know what, the name of the file is this, the mode is this, and it's been encoding through this format. You might think that just printing, it will print the entire file, but it's a little bit more elaborate than that. If you want to do that, F contains something called read lines, open close. It's a function which allows us to read all the lines that you can have inside of F. For example, I'm gonna run it again. So it will actually provide you a representation that each line is separated by a comma. And you can visualize that each line is represented by a single quote, which means it's a string. The interesting thing here is that what we have in this whole representation is a list, and we'll talk about lists in a different set of videos, but this is a list. Every element of that list contains a line of that text file. Now, occasionally you don't want this. Occasionally you want to process line by line. And if that's the case, we can do a variety of things. Let me just clean out my terminal real quick. And I just want to do read line open close parentheses. F.read line will read a line in that file. In this case, it will read the very first line. If you don't remember, this is our file. It basically read, this is a file. And I'm not so sure if you can notice, but after this is a file, there is an empty space here that is being denoted. That empty space is a new line. So Python is smart enough to recognize not only the line text, but also the escape character that carries that line towards the end of the line. It's called a new line. This is called escape character, and it will be displayed here in after the line, this is a file. This is an interesting observation. Now, it means that if I decide to copy this line and then paste it again, I'll save this file, I'll run it again. Notice what's happening. This is a file, next line, empty new line. Next line, containing lines, next line, empty new line. So what is happening at this point is that we not only having the reading part successfully, but also it gives you the new lines character. The next line, the next step, is that how we're gonna do the actual reading part of the entire file. One approach is to just copy and paste that line again and again, which I'm not so sure how many lines it will result in. For example, we write here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can copy and paste 8 times that, and obviously you probably get fired because of that, because 8 lines is a small file. But can you imagine a file with containing thousands of lines of code? Or when you're reading a file that has many gigabytes there, it will take you a while to copy and paste. For that, if you probably remember, when we have those kind of circumstances, what we need to do is to identify what is actually repetitive, in this case, the read line. And we can do a couple of tricks here. We can use the for loop, and we can say for every line that you read that is in the handler f, I want you to print the line. So instead of doing this line, it will iterately do printing the line. So if we try to do this part, I'm just going to clear out my terminal. And if I run it, it will read the entire line, the entire files. So this will demonstrate how you're going to read each file. At this point, I probably recognize what bothers you. It bothers you that it will read indeed the entire file. The only problem is that it's printing those new lines escape characters. And I'm going to show you how do you remove those parts. Since the line is a string when you read it, or Python will treat it as a string, there is a function, it's called strip. Strip will chunk the last escape character that we have in the line. So that will allow us to remove those new lines character that we have. Let's save this script and then run it again. Now you can see the difference that we have. So we not only have the aspect of reading each line by line, like we demonstrated in the past, but also we were able to have the ability to chomp the new line, which looks nicer. Yeah, the only problem is that we really chomped the line, and now we don't have that new line. But of course, if your purpose is only to read the line, this will do the trick. Next example demonstrates how to read a file that is not in the same directory. Previously, we have sample.txt, which is in the same directory as our script, but maybe we're interested to read a file that is in a different directory. For example, I create a directory called directory. Sorry about the redundancy. And inside of the directory, there is another file called another file.txt. If you notice, the contents is this is another file containing lines of text, goodbye again. So basically, we're interested to read the file called another file.txt that is in the directory. Notice that our script is read file example of one. Yeah. So the only difference that we need to provide is that we need to specify in the open function the path. For example, currently we are in the desktop. We're going to read it in directory / and instead of sample.txt will be another file.txt. Still reading mode. Everything remains the same. Yeah. So the only thing I'm going to do, I'm going to save this script and run it again. And notice it's reading now what is in directory and then another file. If you keep changing your paths and you don't know, it's probably convenient to create a variable called path. Path basically will establish the file that you're going to read a couple files later on. So instead of avoiding all these big messages here, the only thing you can do here is to establish your path here in the variable path, and you can just concatenate path to whatever your file that you're looking for. So check this out. I'm going to clear this part. Still reading the file. This is handy because occasionally we're going to have to read multiple files that are located in a directory. So if that is the case, we will talk later on about lists. You can put all the file names there and just run them through a loop, and that will basically process them consecutively. Another example that we're going to talk about relates with going back to this notion of the loop without doing the for loop. Notice that when we deal with the for loop, we use a combination between the for and the in, because in this case the file, if you remember, is an iterative data structure. It's an iterative structure. You mentioned data structure. It's an iterative structure that basically holds a line, including the new line, per index. So there's another way. If you are a while lover, yeah, you can do something similar. It's a little bit more elaborate, but if you come from programming more from the aspect of maybe C++ or Java, C#, sorry, you can say something as long as the line, you need a line that doesn't hit what we call the empty string. Yeah, it's an open close line. What you're gonna do, the line will be, if you remember in the very first example, will be updated by f.readLine, like that. And what you do in the next line, which in this case line 5, you just jump or remove the new line. There is a catch on this. Look, check this out. I'm gonna save this and I'm gonna run this, and it's gonna crash, or did not crash. So why? Because I'm running 01. Sorry, that's why it didn't crash. I was expecting to crash here. Boom. Okay, now it crashes. So not that I'm proud that it crashes. I knew it was gonna crash. The reason why this crash is because there is a situation here where Python doesn't recognize line inside of the while. Yeah, line 3, it says here. In line 3, there is a line that you're trying to use. Line has not been defined. For that, you need to define your line before you get into the while. So there is a condition on this. So we can do the line. You can do it like something similar like this. Something like f.readLine, like that. And then you're gonna check, hey, is the line not equals to the null read lines? You need to be careful with this because then you're gonna override your current line. So if that is not true, you're gonna print and then strip it. then update. Yeah, let's see what's happening here. Yeah, so we have all the lines. Now notice what I did there. I kind of changed our previous example. I don't know if you noticed, but I swapped this line there with the other line. Notice what's the first line that we read here. This is a file. If I swap that line, notice what's going to be our first line. Containing lines of text, blah, blah, blah. What happened here is that we initialize our line to be the first line that we read. It's going to check, hey, is the line not equal to a null? That is true. Yeah, that's why we write. So on line 4, what we're doing in line 4 is that what is going to be reading in this part, whatever you have in line is going to be overridden by the next line. In this case will be containing lines. So you need to be very careful how you do your sequence of commands here. Now there is another way you can get away. If you want to keep that order, you can just initialize this stuff to whatever you want. I'll just put some random stuff there. And that will work if you want to keep that format. Yeah. The only problem here is that you're gonna have so be careful with that. The only problem is that you're gonna have some garbage at the very beginning, which is not null. Yeah, but you're gonna keep doing that. So be careful with that. Personally, I like the 4 because that kind of gives more incentive of what Python wants to approach, but occasionally you might need to have the while loop. You need to just recognize that part. If you want to go through the while loop, what I recommend is to basically check out the ordering. If you want to keep that f.read line, why don't you just print this as soon as you get to the while and finally print the line. Okay. So 3 different flavors, and that's how we basically read a file using Python. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be posting this on the website.